Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and get started with some housekeeping items, and we'll continue to welcome people as they get here. But good morning. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Karen Swift. I'm a Senior Manager in Community Relations. We appreciate you spending part of your day with us. We do have interpretation available this morning, so if you are here and you are seeking interpretation in Spanish, please click on the interpretation icon, which is on the bottom of your screen. Pick the language you'd like to listen to, so in this case, Spanish, and then you will be able to access our Spanish interpreter. And now I'm going to invite my colleague to say the same message in Spanish. Edgar?
Yes, buenas tardes, buenos días. Me llamo Edgar Gutiérrez, soy un miembro del equipo de alcance público. Nada más quería hacer un anuncio breve para los participantes que necesiten o estén interesados en escuchar la presentación en español. La reunión de hoy ofrece servicios de traducción de idioma al español y nuestra intérprete se llama Diana Orozco. Si está interesado, puede buscar el icono que parece un globo mundial y ahí le hace clic y va a escoger español. En cuanto escoge el español, va a empezar a escuchar la presentación en ese idioma y también vamos a proveer la presentación en español en el chat. Entonces busque el enlace en el chat y así puede seguirnos en el mismo idioma. Gracias.
Thank you, Edgar. So here's a little agenda slide of what you can expect from us this morning. So here we are. Welcome again on behalf of Metro. We'll have a project presentation from our project manager and our technical consultant. Then we'll have a short Q&A session. And so that will be really to help clarify anything that zipped through during the presentation that you had questions about. If the audio somehow goes out for you and you missed a slide, we want to make sure that everybody was able to hear and understand the slides that we showed. And that will then in turn help inform the next section, which is comments. And that's really why we're here today, is to accept your public comments on the shape of the I-405 Sepulveda Pass ExpressLanes project. And then we'll wrap up at the end with next steps. We do have a limited time window today, but we will certainly take as many questions and comments as we can based on the time. So we hope that you'll take advantage of the time that we have together to share your feedback. I do want to invite any folks who are here today on behalf of elected officials or on behalf of neighborhood councils or homeowners groups to send us a message through the Q&A. We will be glad to acknowledge you at a later point in the presentation. I know if we were all in a meeting room together, we'd be able to spot you. And I see a couple of you already logged in as attendees, but we would be glad to give you recognition at the meeting today. So go ahead and use that Q&A function to let us know you're here. Next slide. So a few more housekeeping items. Your videos are off and microphones are muted, so we can't see you eating lunch today or drinking your morning coffee still, so feel free to do what you need to do, and your microphones are muted for now. During the Q&A session, we'll use that Q&A function. So again, that's at the bottom of your screen, and you can use that to submit questions to us that we can take during the Q&A. When we get to the comment section later, we will be allowing verbal comments. And so at that point, we'll switch to the raised hand function and we will call on you. We'll probably provide a little bit more detail about how that's going to work as we go through this morning's session, but know that we'll have verbal comments later. If you need to get going early and you can't stay with us because you've got another meeting or some other demand takes your time, you can always use the Q&A function also to give us comments, and we'll be sharing a link to our online comment form. You can use that as well. If you have any technical problems today, need a recap of what I just shared, or you're struggling to access things, go ahead and call our technical support line at 909-600-2126. Again, 909-600-2126, and we'll be glad to assist you. Next slide. So I do want to remind everyone that Metro does have a code of conduct. We are committed to ensuring that everyone here today can fairly and clearly share your ideas, your comments, and your concerns about the I-405 Sepulveda Pass ExpressLanes project. So we'll need your help to make sure that we have that safe environment. So we ask you to respect the format of the meeting and give everyone here an opportunity to comment. When it's your turn to give a verbal comment, we ask you to turn off your cell phones and do your best to calm the barking dogs. And maybe your children are back in school, so we have less kids running around. But anyway, we'll be able to hear you a little better if there's less background noise. We ask you especially to treat fellow community members and agency and everyone here on behalf of Metro with respect. So And you can also do that by addressing your comments directly to us. So, no need to kind of comment on a previous commenter's comment. Just go ahead and direct that right to Metro, and we'll be actively listening and taking all your comments directly. And then just today, maintain a conversational tone. So with all of that, we can look forward to a very positive meeting, but should we be disrupted at any time or have challenges to the code of conduct, Metro does reserve the right to use that mute button, but I'm optimistic and very hopeful we will not need to do that this morning. So thank you for your cooperation in advance with our code of conduct. Next slide. So before we get underway, I do want to highlight for you that Metro has a number of projects in the 405 corridor, and so some of you may have attended meetings or be engaging with us on other projects, but this is one of the most congested corridors in the country, and so we have a number of projects active in this area right now, and we'll be sharing links to those separate projects in the chat. So there's the Purple Line or D Line extension. So if you travel on the west side, you're probably dealing with some of our construction impacts there. There's the Sepulveda Transit Corridor project, and I may be a familiar face if you've been engaging with us on that project. I also lead the outreach for that project, and that's deliberate, so that you're engaging with the same community relations staff on both this project and Sepulveda Transit Corridor. We also have the I-405 Comprehensive Multimodal Corridor Plan. That is a high-level planning effort from North County to Orange County, just getting underway with some of our outreach. And so you'll see a survey coming out on that project later this year and more to come on that one. And then lastly, we have the traffic reduction study, which has been looking at congestion pricing around LA County. And so you may have attended some meetings on that project. So lots of efforts looking at ways to improve mobility in this very congested corridor. And each of these projects has its own separate environmental clearance. So some of them have their own separate funding from Measure M or from other sources. So they're each separate, but we're all coordinating on the back end. And so we have a lot of coordination. So we do want to assure you that as we go forward, we're working closely together to make sure that all of these projects make sense. So next slide. So with that, we're going to show a brief video and then get underway with our presentation. Thank you so much.
So I live in Sherman Oaks and I work in Santa Monica. My commute to work is only about 20 miles, but with traffic, it takes 60 minutes or more.
I work in downtown and I have to come from Canoga Park, so I have to take the 405 to get to work.
Dragging a horse trailer over the 405, it's just a nightmare.
It takes time away from your life.
If I wake up late, then it's over.
You have to leave so far in advance.
Sometimes it can literally take 2 hours to go 5 miles over the Sepulveda Pass.
You know, my boss is not very happy with me if I'm late.
But unfortunately, it's the only route I could take to get to my destination.
The 405 freeway is one of the most traveled in the nation, with traffic increasing each year as our economy and population grow. That's why Metro has a plan to make it easier to get around. The 405 through the Sepulveda Pass is especially challenging and complex, and will need more than one project to improve travel in this area. Along with better transit and other improvements, Metro is planning express lanes for a better drive on the 405. Express lanes are managed lanes where toll prices are based on real-time traffic conditions and vary according to the level of traffic congestion using dynamic pricing. To use express lanes, you'll need a fast-track flex transponder connected to an express lanes account. Dynamic pricing means that the toll is higher when there is more traffic in the express lanes and lower when the traffic is lighter. Lanes are free for qualified carpools, van pools, and transit vehicles, and tolls are discounted for qualified clean air vehicles to move more people in fewer cars and encourage sustainable travel behaviors. This can help keep traffic in the express lanes flowing smoothly for a more reliable trip. The I-405 Sepulveda Pass express lanes have $260 million in funding from the Measure M half-cent sales tax and would add express lanes between US 101 and I-10. These new lanes would expand the existing network of express lanes. Revenue from express lanes tolls fund the operational costs of the program, with any leftover revenue invested into the corridor. This net revenue could potentially fund more frequent transit service and toll credits for transit users. Historically, this net toll revenue has also been used for local transportation improvement projects within 3 miles of the corridor.
The combination of being able to get someplace faster and with less stress on the express lanes, that's just a win-win.
So you have a flight that's at that right in the pinnacle of rush hour, and there was an express lane. Yeah, I would use an express lane, no problem.
My coworker and I commute together so that we can ride in the carpool lane. Having an express lane would definitely benefit me and my coworker.
If I could get credit on my transponder every time I took the subway or the metro, then I would definitely use that.
And when I have to go to the Inland Empire with my horses, then I take the express lanes on the 10. It's a dramatic savings in time and stress.
Do it. Anything to make it better.
With that, I'm going to invite Shahrazad Amiri to say some opening remarks on behalf of Metro.
Thank you very much, Karen. Good morning, everyone. I'm Shahrazad Amiri, Executive Officer for Metro's Congestion Reduction Programs. On behalf of Metro and our project partner, Caltrans, it's my pleasure to welcome you today to the 405 Sepulveda Pass Express Lane Scoping Meeting as we begin our environmental study for the project. The 405 Sepulveda Pass is a critical corridor within LA County as attested by the various multimodal studies underway that Karen noted earlier in the presentation. Metro strives to proactively inform, engage, and obtain input from the public as we undertake projects. In addition to this meeting, there are various methods through which you can provide comments through October 1st of this year. That information will be provided shortly as part of today's presentation. Please note that we are still in the initial study stage with the aim of gathering comments and input through the scoping process for consideration as we further develop the project. We appreciate your time and interest, and we look forward to your comments today. Thank you again. And I'm going to hand the meeting off to Alice Tolar, who is the project manager for this particular effort from Metro.
Thank you, Shahrazad. Appreciate those opening comments. Again, I'm Alice Tolar, and I am a senior planning manager at Metro in the Congestion Reduction Department, and I'm proud to be the project manager on this project. Next slide, please. Thank you. Okay, so our scoping purpose and your role. So scoping, again, as Shahrazad mentioned, scoping is the first step in the environmental review process, and that's where we find ourselves at this point. What is scoping? Scoping identifies the purpose of the project and refines the alternatives under consideration. Scoping determines major issues for the environmental analysis, and scoping identifies project goals and evaluation criteria. What is the public's role? To help us better understand the corridor dynamics, to provide us comments, input, and project relevant information, and to get involved and stay involved in the project as it develops. Next slide, please. So again, back to the topic of environmental study. So the environmental scoping process, let's talk a little bit about that. So the National Environmental Policy Act, NEPA, says that scoping is an early and open process for determining the scope of issues to be addressed in the Environmental Impact Statement, EIS, and for identifying the significant issues related to a proposed action or project, in this case, a project. The California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA, says that scoping is designed to examine a proposed project early in the environmental impact report analysis process and is intended to identify the range of issues pertinent to the proposed project and feasible alternatives or mitigation measures to avoid potentially significant environmental effects. So EIS, Environmental Impact Statement, EIR, Environmental Impact Report, is a combined federal and state document. Next slide, please. So as you've heard in the video and as you've heard folks speak about so far, Metro has a plan to make it easier to get around LA. It includes reducing congestion and creating access to opportunity. This project specifically works to improve travel time reliability, provide additional sustainable mobility options, and maximize benefits from Measure M. And we'll talk a little bit about that coming up soon. Next slide. So this project will study potential managed lane improvements to improve traffic conditions on I-405, starting south of I-10 and terminating north of US 101. We're going to look at two different managed lanes, or two different types of managed lanes. The first is high occupancy vehicle, HOV lanes, also known as carpool lanes, which require more than one person per vehicle to use the lanes. We're also going to look at high occupancy toll lanes, hot lanes, also known as express lanes, which require more than one person for free travel and allows single occupancy vehicles to pay to use the lane. Metro currently operates express lanes on the I-110 and I-10 freeways. Next slide. Great, thank you. So what we're looking at here with the I-405 Sepulveda Pass Express Lanes project is a 14-mile corridor within Los Angeles and unincorporated areas of LA County. And we absolutely recognize that this is a regionally significant project, corridor, and that it impacts jurisdictions beyond the defined project limits. Metro and Caltrans are partners in developing the project. Metro is preparing the planning reports and the environmental document, which we've been talking about, and Caltrans provides oversight and is the lead agency for CEQA and NEPA. So let's go to funding here. So on funding, again, we mentioned earlier Measure M. So Measure M is the local sales tax passed by the LA County voters in 2016, which provides $260 million for this project. Additional funding sources will be identified as the project advances through the development process. And with respect to operation is anticipated in advance of the 2028 Los Angeles Summer Olympics and Paralympics. Let's go to the next slide. Perfect. So just a little bit of background, if you will, on the Express Lanes program. So for Metro, the Express Lanes program was initiated as a one-year congestion reduction demonstration project. That project was done on the I-110, which opened in November of 2012 between Adams Boulevard and State Route 91 and 182nd Street. Also opening on the 10 in February of 2013 between Alameda Street and I-605. So again, 1 year congestion reduction demonstration project on the I-110 and the I-10. These express lanes were developed in partnership with Federal Highway Administration, Caltrans, and California Highway Patrol. And a successful program prompted the Metro Board and California Legislature to grant tolling in perpetuity. Let's go ahead and move on to the next slide. Thank you. So, again, due to the success of the program, the Metro Board directed staff to produce a county-wide express lane strategic plan, studying HOV corridors in LA County and ranking these corridors on a number of factors. Factors including technical and physical feasibility, financial feasibility, and opportunities to close gaps in the network. So those corridors ranking the highest and considered to be the most promising were placed in the Tier 1 near-term implementation category. Near-term here defined as projects that could be implemented within 10 to 15 years. The I-405 Sepulveda Pass Express Lanes project is one of those Tier 1 projects. Next slide, please. Oh, thank you. So Metro Express Lanes are designed to improve traffic flow and provide motorists, including solo drivers, a more reliable travel option in LA County. Express lanes allow carpools, van pools, and buses toll-free travel with a fast track transponder, while also providing single occupancy vehicles the option to pay a toll to use the lane. Tolls for vehicles that don't qualify for free travel are calculated based on traffic congestion, and they vary according to the level of congestion. So tolls are higher when congestion is heavier and lower when traffic is lighter. So as we look at this cross section that we provided here, just to give you a bit of an idea, particularly for those who may not be as familiar with an Express Lanes facility, what we show here is the Express Lanes facility alongside the general purpose lanes. A couple of things we wanted to bring your attention to. If we look in the lower left-hand corner, we have labeled number 3. Safety is a #1 priority for Metro, and that includes with respect to our Express Lanes facilities. So we want to make sure that we adequately inform motorists that the ability to enter into or exit out of the facility is coming up. So signs are in place to let folks know that they will have an opportunity to decide to, let's say, remain in the general purpose lanes for the duration of their trip, or they could also choose to utilize the express lanes. So we want to give advance notice so that they can make safe moves in and out of the facility. Also, something else that we want to make sure that we do, because it's important to give motorists as much opportunity to make an informed decision as possible, we want to make sure that we include pricing signage. And typically with our pricing signage, you will see that we provide the toll associated with utilizing the facility to access the next destination. So if they're going to get in the facility and let's say they're going to travel and get off at the next available destination, then it gives them and lets them know what their toll will be associated with that decision. Also, we want to include what the toll would be associated with if they were to utilize the facility and travel the full length of the corridor, what the toll associated with that decision would be. And of course, there's other signs, and I know you saw several of those signs in the video. And for those that are familiar with the facility, they I am sure are aware of the signs that are out there. We mentioned, in the video, and you were able to see there, and I mentioned just a moment ago, the Fast Track Flex transponder. So currently for the Metro Express Lanes program, we utilize the transponder that you see in the upper right-hand corner there. It is, again, the Fast Track Flex transponder, and it's a switchable transponder where motorists utilizing the facility, they can indicate the number of occupants, and the number of occupants within their vehicle as they use the facility determines the appropriate toll for that particular motorist. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to the next slide. Great. So the purpose of the I-405 Sepulveda Pass Express Lanes project is to reduce congestion and improve the overall movement of people and goods on I-405 by doing a couple of things and by focusing on a couple of things. So we want to do this by providing additional mobility options, improving traffic flows and operation, reducing congestion, improving overall performance within the constrained project corridor. Also, we would like to increase the continuity of the regional price managed lanes network by closing the gaps between existing and planned facilities. Next slide. Thank you. So the I-405, let's talk about the I-405 generally speaking. The I-405 between I-105 and US 101 is one of the most congested highways in the US, with an average of 56 hours of delay yearly per commuter in 2019. The project is needed to address traffic congestion and related deficiencies. And what we do know about the corridor is that much of the congestion in the constrained Sepulveda Pass can be attributed to limited existing roadways and limited alternative transportation options. Running, north-south through the Santa Monica Mountains between the San Fernando Valley and the South Bay West Side in LA County. Currently, daily traffic volumes of 289,000 vehicles most definitely exceeds capacity. And much of the existing I-405 facility, within the project limits are classified as extremely degraded. And I wanted to chat just a little bit about this concept of being degraded. So, much of the I-405 HOV lanes within the project limits are not performing as originally intended, as they do not offer trip reliability, travel times, and travel flow, as well as productively or proactively manage and sustain mobility within the corridor. The Express Lanes project seeks to ease highway and local congestion providing a mobility alternative to carpools, van pools, and provide choices to single occupancy drivers. According to FHWA guidelines, an HOV lane is considered degraded if the average traffic speed during the peak commute hour is less than 45 miles per hour for more than 10% of the time. I want to read that again because I know sometimes it's helpful for folks. According to FHWA guidelines, an HOV lane is considered degraded if the average traffic speed during the peak commute hour is less than 45 miles per hour and more than or for more than 10% of the time. So again, much of the existing I-405 HOV facilities within the project limits are classified as extremely degraded. Next slide, please. Great. What I'd like to do now is hand the mic over to our colleague, Jeff Fromhertz. Jeff is from WSP, and they are the technical consultant working now on our current phase of the project, our environmental and project report. Jeff?
Thank you, Alice. And I think it's still technically good morning. So good morning, everybody. As you've seen the project limits on exhibits that Alice was showing, we just wanted to provide a different perspective, looking at it as an aerial view. And if we split the corridor for the most part into thirds, the southern third, what we're looking at here, starting at with the I-10 freeway to the left, is before we go up the grade is still fairly flat, and as you can see, very urbanized between where the Expo line crosses. You can see where Santa Monica Boulevard and Wilshire Boulevard, and we do have a few, very important features along this stretch of the corridor, including to the west of the freeway, we have the VA complex just south of Wilshire Boulevard. We have the National Cemetery just east of the freeway, north of Wilshire Boulevard. We also have the Bad News Bears baseball and softball complex right up against the freeway itself. So it's a very urban area. These are just some of the conditions we'll be looking at as we develop our preliminary designs, and we'll get into the alternatives in a minute. And then the next slide shows basically the middle third of the corridor as we're starting to get up the grade going northbound with Sunset Boulevard to the left. And we do have the Getty Center, the entrance, and the museum itself on the west of the freeway. We have some large water tanks near the top of the grade that serves the communities, and there's some existing retaining walls that were recently built. We also have the Skirball Cultural Center to the right of the photo here. So this is basically near the top of the grade, through the grade. And then the next third, the northern third of the project on the next slide, you can see coming down the grade, again, gets into a very urbanized condition at the bottom of the grade. We do have the Mulholland overpass that was built as with the last project. We have Sepulveda Boulevard that does traverse, for the most part, parallel to the 405, either on the east or the west side of the freeway. It does cross several times underneath the 405. And then our northern limits are at the 101 interchange where Ventura Boulevard crosses over, and the mall. And then just north of our project limits, you can see is where the Sepulveda Basin and the LA River crosses under the 405. So it's just to give you a feel of the project conditions. Now the next slides, we're going to talk about what we're planning on studying during this environmental phase, as Alice was mentioning. And what we start with on environmental documents is called the no-build alternative, or alternative 1. And the no-build really represents the existing conditions that's out there today. But we do look at how the existing conditions will perform, not just today, but in the future as we compare our other alternatives. So it represents what would happen if no action was taken. It provides a comparison point to understand how the impacts of the other proposed alternatives compare to the no build. And then currently we have 4 build alternatives currently under preliminary consideration. And again, the point, what we're hoping to get out of these meetings, and today's meeting, is some input and some comment. Does not mean these are the only alternatives we're going to study as far as our project, but these are the basic ones. There will be hybrids, there'll be variations as the project team develops, as the project develops as well. So it's very important at this stage, no alternative has been selected. We have not even begun the analysis of alternatives, and no determination has been made to proceed with improvements or any of the alternatives. As such, no potential impacts or even property relocations have been identified at this point. So what you'll see on the next slide are really just schematics that show the existing lane configurations. They're not really even meant to show widths, but they just basically show the lane configurations we're going to be looking at. Again, in existing, what we're showing on the screen right now, alternative one, is basically the existing condition. What we call the lanes that are not the carpool lanes, we call general purpose lanes, where the cars and trucks travel. The very outside lane sometimes is called an auxiliary lane. That's a lane that sometimes is between one ramp to the next, but is not a continuous lane on the entire freeway. And then also in the median is where we have the HOV lanes, the existing HOV lanes. So again, that's the existing conditions. So for this particular alternative, no additional travel lanes or ramp improvements would be installed as part of the project, and no widening would be anticipated. Therefore, no right of way for alternative one. Alternative two, what you'll see next, again, is basically the same number of lanes that is out there today. And by the way, none of these alternatives would remove any of the general purpose lanes. So what we're looking at is a difference in the median between the existing carpool lanes and our proposed express lanes. So alternative two, we would convert the existing carpool lane to one express lane and maintain a buffer, but you would need the fast track and the transponder, as Alice was saying, to utilize the express lane. This would not have widening either, since it's the same lane configurations that's out there today, so no property acquisitions would be anticipated. And when we say standard lanes, what that means is we're maintaining the lane widths that are out there today. Most of the lanes that the cars and trucks are on are 12-foot lanes today. The next slide, alternative three, is where we start to look where there's opportunities and where there's available right-of-way width to install a second express lane. So we would convert the existing carpool lane to an express lane and also look to put in a second express lane. So we have two express lanes in both northbound and southbound directions. This particular alternative, we would look to minimize or reduce some of the lane width, maybe by 1 foot to 11 foot, and also reduce some of the existing shoulders that are out there to allow us to put in a second lane and minimize the widening required to do that. It's also important that the lanes that the trucks travel on the outside of the freeway would still remain at 12 feet. But there would still be some potential widening and property acquisitions required for this particular alternative. Alternative four, the next slide, is a very similar lane configuration, but this does maintain what we call standard lane widths, which are standard 10-foot shoulders and 12-foot lanes for all the lanes across the freeway. So this would basically be the same lane configurations as alternative three, but it would require additional widening to maintain these widths. That's why it says standard 12-foot lanes and shoulder widths. So this would have some additional widening and property acquisitions required as part of the project. Again, none of that has been determined where or what specific locations at this point. We have not started that process. And our last alternative is looking at to compare how the facility would operate if we looked at providing a second carpool lane, a second HOV lane to the facility, and also be very similar to our previous two alternatives. Look at minimize the widening as much as possible by reducing some of the lane widths to minimize the additional widening, and it would require some property acquisitions. So all the alternatives that add a second lane in each direction would require some widening. I'm going to turn it back to Alice to continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. So again, speaking of sort of the reports that are being prepared, we've talked about the environmental and the project report. So the environmental document analyzes potential environmental impacts and identifies mitigation measures for potential impacts. The project report is the engineering document. It details facility design, traffic analysis, project costs, and that type of information. We'll also be preparing a concept of operations report, which describes how the express lanes will be designed and operated, including operational policies, tolling infrastructure, facility design, that level of information. Additionally, a traffic and revenue study will be conducted, analyzing potential revenue and toll rates for this project. And then another activity that will need to take place deals with our partnership again with Caltrans. So Metro and Caltrans will need to apply for tolling authority through the California Transportation Commission, CTC, in order to implement express lanes on the I-405. Next slide, please. So as part of the environmental process, there are a large number of environmental considerations to be studied. This is just a snapshot of some of those areas of study, including air quality, environmental justice and equity, looking at aesthetics, visual type impacts, considering critical resources such as biological and cultural resources, right of way. There's a great deal of environmental considerations that will be studied. Let's go ahead and move on to the next slide. Thank you. So I just wanted to kind of give us a snapshot, just spend a couple of minutes talking about the project development overall, what the larger picture looks like and where we are in that process, as well as in the current project development phase that we're in, this environmental, kind of where we're at and how we're going to move forward. So if I can draw your attention to the top of the slide right now, we see the multicolored arrows there. So a great deal of early planning efforts have gone into getting ourselves to the point where we are moving into an environmental process on this project. Again, we currently find ourselves in that blue section there, environmental review. And as we move through environmental review, we would be moving into engineering and design, then of course into construction, and ultimately operation and maintenance for the project. Now that again, we've mentioned a couple of times, but for those who might have joined us late, I wanted to mention that the project itself, the I-405 Sepulveda Pass Express Lanes project, is anticipated to be in operation in advance of the 2028 Summer Olympics and Paralympics. Now, if we look at the bottom of the slide here, we look at the blue section. Of course, we find ourselves over here on the left at the very early stages of the environmental process. We find ourselves, all of us here together, participating in a scoping meeting during our scoping period. What we really would like to be able to achieve through this process is as much input from you folks as possible. We're looking for you to provide input across a variety of things, the alternatives that are being considered, the goals and purpose of the project. There's a great deal of topics associated with this project that we would like to hear from you on. So where we kind of see ourselves going and how the current phase of the project is scheduled to move forward. Again, we are here in the summer of 2021, beginning the initial process. We want to take the feedback that we've received through scoping and begin to do alternative screening and consider the alternatives and the impacts of those alternatives. And as Jeff said, different variations of project alternatives that may come to the surface. We want to initiate technical studies, and we want to begin to work toward the draft of our environmental impact report and environmental impact study. So we find ourselves, let's say at the end of 2022, prepared with a draft EIR, EIS to circulate that to the public so that we can get public and agency review and comment back on the draft. And then the work will set in on updating the draft and addressing the issues and considerations that come in on the draft. And we will work toward a target of the end of 2023 for the revised EIR, EIS, based of course on the comments and feedback we've received. And we will be preparing a final environmental impact report, environmental impact study. So that's kind of where we are right now. We're in this environmental project report period. So again, your feedback is valuable. The little note I have there at the bottom was just for all of us to take a moment to focus on the importance of providing the feedback, letting us know what you're thinking. All of it serves to inform project development as we move forward. Next slide, please. Great. What I'd like to do now is hand the mic over to my colleague, Matthew Marquez, and Matthew's going to provide a bit of a snapshot of some of the outreach and public engagement efforts that we've gone through. And I believe Matthew will be leading us into a Q&A session as well. Matthew.
Hi, good morning, everybody. My name is Matthew Marquez, Metro Community Relations Officer for LA Metro. And yes, as Alice mentioned, we've been doing a lot to raise project awareness for this project, not only for the local communities along the project corridor, but also more regionally spread out, and those that utilize the 405 freeway on a daily basis. And so we wanted to review some of the tactics that we've been using to reach out to the community and make them aware. And as we can see today, we have over 114. I think at one point we had 121 people on the line. So obviously our tactics are working to get people here today and into our meetings to provide comments, which is just what we really want to see during this process. So thank you all for participating today. We really, really appreciate it. So one of the first tactics that we put together to help notify the community as well as our local partner public agencies is to prepare a notice of preparation and notice of intent to our public agencies. We also developed several legal ads, both in English and Spanish, in some high circulation newspapers, including LA Daily News, The Sentinel, and La Opinión. We also posted in our Metro blogs, English and Spanish blogs, The Source and El Pasajero, to help raise awareness for the project as well. We also used an array of digital tactics and resources to help the community learn more about the project, including our project website, our project helpline, which is available to anybody that has questions, our project email as well, where you can ask questions or leave comments. And then we also have our interactive story map, which we will hopefully go over at some point later on today. We also developed a very robust e-blast campaign where over 700 stakeholders to date have opted in to receive regular email updates, including information about meetings, important milestones of the project. So it's an important way to stay updated with the project. This is usually our first place where you'll get some announcements about the project. We also had 340 people that are also enrolled to receive text updates on the project. So people are also wanting to receive updates on the project via text versus email. And with our e-blast, we see that a lot of people are engaging with our communications. So a lot of people are interested. We have over 6,100 opens of our emails, and a lot of people are also engaging with our emails as well too. Within our emails today, we have over 1,100 clicks within our emails to our respective calls to actions, whether that be registering for a Zoom meeting, reading a source article, going to our project website, or visiting our interactive story map. So people are engaging with our materials and learning more about the project as we're continuing our e-blast campaigns. You may have also noticed and been tracking us through social media. You may have seen our recent project video or stakeholder survey in your Facebook or Instagram news feeds. That was intentional. So we put together a social media campaign to push those materials out and raise more project awareness to those that were traveling along the 405 freeway between the project areas. So we're happy to report that to date for our stakeholder survey, we received over 1,350 responses to that survey, which is a great sample size. It's going to be really great data that's going to help inform our technical studies in this next phase of the project. Additionally, we have over 1,600 views of the project video. So we see that people are getting familiar with the project, are starting to become aware and understand what the project is, and hopefully we'll become more involved and engaged in the project as we move along. Lastly, once again, we're glad to see so many people on the line with us. We do want to take a moment to acknowledge some of our representatives, elected official representatives, neighborhood councils, HOAs, and other representatives that are with us this morning. So I'm going to go ahead and do some introductions for us. So first off, on the state elected offices, we have John Kerpies from Office of Assembly Member Richard Bloom's office, District 50. Thank you for joining us this morning, or actually this afternoon. Now it's this afternoon. Additionally, we have Logan Smith, Field Rep, for the Office of California State Assembly Member Arden Nazarian, District 4. Thank you for joining us. On the local side of things, we have Dan Rodman, Transportation Deputy for Office of LA City Mayor Eric Garcetti. Thank you for joining us, Dan. Always appreciate you being here. And then also from the office of LA City Council Member Monica Rodriguez, District 7, we have Anissa Raja. Thank you so much for joining us, Anissa. We also have some neighborhood council representatives as well too. We have Glenn Bailey, who is representing both the Encino and Northridge East neighborhood councils. Thank you for joining us. And then with regards to homeowners associations, we have Bob Anderson from the Sherman Oaks Homeowners Association with us as well. And then representing a couple other key stakeholder groups, we have John Rulin, president of the Westchester Streetscape Improvement Association, Michelle Weiner, chair of the Culver City Bicycle and Pedestrian Committee, Alex Campbell with the LAUSD Environmental Health and Safety. We also appreciate your comment, making sure that LAUSD is considered in the environmental review process for this project. So thank you for joining us. We have Gerard Wright with BizFed and the Greater Los Angeles Realtors Association. Thank you, Gerard. Always appreciate you being here with us. We have Joanne D'Antonio with Greenlight to Mobility, Mercedes Ortiz with Pacoima Beautiful. Thank you for joining us. I also see in the chat we have Jay Ross with the West LA Sawtown Neighborhood Council, and we have Terry Tippett with the chair of the West Side Neighborhood Council. And we will do some additional acknowledgements as they come in this morning, but please feel free to also put those in the chat and we'll make sure to acknowledge you later on in the meeting.
Great. So again, we have through October 1st, so we invite you to share your comments. And again, we really appreciate you being with us. This has been wonderful feedback. Alice, anything you want to sort of share as a goodbye on behalf of the project team?
No, other than just expressing, a feeling of gratitude, right? I really appreciate folks, again, that took time, to not only share a lunch hour, but share a lunch 2 hours with us today and to provide comment. And I just want to encourage folks, as Karen has done a fabulous job of doing, but I want to encourage folks to spread the word, help us in that way, help us get the word out about what is being considered. Help us get as much comment as possible in, particularly during the comment period that, again, we have through October 1st to hear back from you on. And then obviously you've gotten involved in the project. So a hip hip hooray to all of you folks. And yeah, we look forward to you staying involved in the project as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Alice. So with that, we'll go ahead and conclude today. Just a reminder to stay safe out there. Please mask up, wash your hands, social distance. We're still in a pandemic and we want everyone to come through this safely. So be safe out there and we will look forward to engaging with you on this project and other nearby projects in the future. Thanks again, everybody, for being here.
Thank you, everybody.